Welcome to the Thrift Store Kitchen Review, where I test all the weird junk from the thrift store so you don't have to. Welcome to today's edition of the Thrift Store Kitchen Review. I've mocked it again. I'm probably going to mock it in the future as well, but I found it and I have it in hand. That's right, it's Cathy Mitchell's Quick and Easy Dump Dinners. And I found this at a Goodwill in Roswell, Georgia for $2.92. And today we're going to be testing some of its recipes. So before I start cooking, I've gone ahead and marked some highlights from this book. First, we have Cathy's bio. Some rather interesting stuff here. She never refers to herself as a chef. Yet, when you pull up the commercial for this exact book, on the screen, it straight up refers to her as a TV chef. Another line. She has been sharing those ideas on television since her first commercial in 1989. Introducing America to the electric sandwich maker. Wait a minute. I mean, I grew up in the 80s and I clearly remember having an electric sandwich maker in the home. It was a little grilled cheese press, and I want to say it was made by Black & Decker. Is this some kind of claim on par with Al Gore claiming he invented the internet? She's repeatedly hawking her other products. Right here, she advertises her microwave pasta boat, which we've already reviewed. She has to tell you how to cook pasta, and doesn't even get that right. I honestly think that her concept of Italian food is just warped. Look at this one, and this is actually going to be the first one we try. Her recipe for pizza, which involves cutting up biscuits and using that as pizza crust, as well as just everything else completely wrong with it. I don't understand why so many of her quote-unquote Italian-style dishes use cottage cheese. Ricotta cheese is not that much more money. Usually it's about the same, and it's just as readily available. Here's a section with some pictures that just probably should have been left out. If you were turned off by the recipes, the pictures just make it all the worse. This is what the pizza is supposed to look like. Here's another one called meatball casserole, where basically you're throwing cheese and meatballs on top of sliced white bread with tomato sauce and putting it in the oven. Even in the glamour shot for the book, that doesn't even look all the way cooked. Cinnamon roll donuts, where you're literally just using canned cinnamon rolls, punching out a hole and frying them. Sure sounds healthy. Here's yet another recipe that uses cut up biscuits as a substitute for actual dough. Here's one that'll get you made fun of if you ever show up with it at a dinner party. The laziest mac and cheese I've ever seen. And look, I actually found the recipe for that garlic bread and meatball casserole, and you try to read through it and it seems quite a few steps were omitted. So this is an idea of what you're looking at with this book. Notice also how few actual spices and seasoning are used in any of these dishes. Now, just another bit of information that I kind of picked up. There was a video, and I will link to it in the description, where somebody did some research on her and got a FaceTime call with her. And she even admitted most of these recipes in her books aren't even hers. And I believe that. She says she has input, which means, oh yeah, I'll do this for the check. She even basically referred to herself as a fraud. So the first food crime from this book I'm going to commit is the deeply delish pizza. Step 1, cut each biscuit into 6 pieces and drop in bottom of glass or ceramic baking pan sprayed with non-stick spray. I'm sorry, I'm not cooking pizza in a glass pan. I have a greased cast iron skillet. I've pre-cut the biscuits into 6 pieces each. So let's get them in the pan and spread them out. It's like refrigerated pizza crust doesn't exist in her world. Try to get this even. Good enough. Cut pepperoni slices into quarters and distribute over biscuits. Yeah, I'm not doing either of those. I'm sorry, pepperoni does not belong below the cheese. Pepperoni needs to get crispy, and that's just an abomination. Add sliced olives and then a light layer of sauce, about 1 cup. Add in blops. What's a blop? Is that even a word? And do not cover the entire surface. And if you look at the top here, 1 cup marinara sauce. I use Prego. Well, that's the least surprising statement yet in this book. Sorry, Catherine, I use Don Pepino's actual pizza sauce. So we're gonna put some of that on here, marinara sauce. Like there's not a grocery store in the country that somehow doesn't carry actual pizza sauce. So let me throw some blops of pizza sauce on here. Get a little more around the edge. Okay, good enough. Sprinkle with a light layer of cheese. I've gone ahead and pre-shredded some mozzarella. So let me do that. Okay, I'll put some pepperoni on top. Oh yeah, and per the book, I'm not using turkey pepperoni either. Sorry, Catherine. And then finally, because we just haven't disgraced pizza enough at this point, I'm gonna add some pineapple. I am so glad they added the tip. You can use any toppings as long as they will cook properly in 25 minutes. Because there is no way I was making this as whoever the author of this intended. So I'm about to throw this in the oven for, as the book says, 25 to 30 minutes, and let's see how it turns out. Here's the pizza after 25 minutes in the oven. I mean, it looks interesting. Definitely, it's deep dish from those biscuits. Let's cut it, take a look. I'll pull this up slow. It cuts through rather quickly. I have the feeling the inside may not be all the way done. Yeah, this is not fun to get out. Let me cut just a little more here. Get a slice. Okay, you can definitely tell it's not solid. That's a bunch of pieces and not just one cohesive crust, but it looks done. Let me taste test this. Yeah, biscuits are not made for pizza. There are plenty of ways to obtain pizza dough. Perhaps they should consider that. On to the next! So the next recipe we're going to try is this one, the skillet pasta and beef dinner, which reading it sounds an awful lot like making hamburger helper just with some fresher ingredients. So the first step, and as I said before, it seems on a few of these recipes, steps were left out. Place ground beef in a large skillet with a cover. Notice it doesn't say whether or not to actually cook the ground beef. I'm going to assume the answer was yes, cook it. So I've already made some ground beef. I'm going to dump it in. And the next step is to add 2 cups of hot water. So there's our 2 cups. A jar of pasta sauce, being that this is cheap, I went with the cheap stuff, ragu. Let me go ahead and add our ragu. And then it says to add the salt in the garlic powder. Now, I've cooked a lot of Italian or Italian style food, and this is literally the first recipe involving anything even remotely Italian that involved using seasoning salt instead of regular salt. But I'm just going by the book here, so let me get some seasoning salt. So I got 1 teaspoon of that, and then I'm going to add half a teaspoon of garlic powder. Okay, now it says to bring it to a boil over high heat, stirring to break up the ground beef. This ground beef is already pretty broken up. I'm using the electric skillet, so I'm going to turn it to about 375. Put the lid on, and once this is boiling, we're going to add the rest of the ingredients. I haven't had it in here very long, but this electric skillet heats up very fast. That water is already starting to boil just a little. I'm going to let it get to a heavier boil before we insert the pasta, but because it's cooking so quick, I'm going to go ahead and get the base stirred up and put the lid back on. And then once it gets back up to a boil, we'll go ahead and add the pasta. So our base is up to boiling, so I've got a box of rotini right here. I'm going to go ahead and just dump in the entire box. Stir it in there. And then it says to cut to about a medium heat. So I'm going to do that real quick. And then it says to let it cook for about 15 minutes. Stirring occasionally, and at that point the pasta should be tender. Now, if there's anything I've learned from cooking from people who write recipes like this, 15 minutes and that pasta is not going to have any texture left. So I'll probably start checking it at about 10. Okay, so it's time for our 5-minute stir. The pasta is definitely starting to soften up some. The sauce is cooking onto it pretty well. Let's see the texture. Yeah, it's cooking pretty well. I'm assuming if I leave this in for 15 minutes, that pasta is just going to be no texture. So we'll be back in 5 to do our next check. Okay, it's time for our 10-minute check. Let me open the lid and take a look at this pasta. That is definitely, I can feel it when putting the spoon in, that it is soft. Yeah, that's done. I'm gonna cut the heat off altogether. If I let this thing go the full 15, there would be no flavor at all left in this food, or no texture. It would just be complete mush. Now I have 1 cup of shredded mozzarella, which I'm supposed to spread over the top of this dish, and then place the lid back on with the heat cut off and just let it melt. So I'm gonna let it sit, and then we're gonna try this. Okay, so the cheese has had a few minutes sit and melt. Let's open this up, and let me get a scoop of this meal and see if it's even halfway decent. Be sure to get some of all the ingredients, the pasta, the cheese, the beef, all of it. Still very hot. Go ahead and get a bite. I mean, it's edible, I'll give it that much. It's not great. I've never found pasta to be very difficult to make, and yes, I understand doing it this way, that there's less cleanup. With almost the same ingredients, I can boil a pot of pasta on my stove while simultaneously taking a decent store-bought sauce, heating it up on the burner next to it, jazzing it up with some decent spices and ingredients and the ground beef, and it would come out way better. You know, part of the problems with the recipes in this book that I notice is that they use very little spice, and when they do, they don't know how to use it. Like, why would you use seasoned salt in a pasta dish? You know, you could use oregano, Italian seasoning, more garlic, stuff like that. Now, we already know, based on the video that I linked in the description, that Cathy Mitchell probably didn't even write this book. And I'm assuming whoever actually wrote this recipe is from somewhere like, I don't know, Iowa, where they just don't seem to believe in using seasoning or using seasoning properly. Now, I've never been to Iowa, but everything I've ever needed to know about Iowa cuisine, I learned from the Facebook page, White People Making White People Food. It's great. You should give them a join. Not only is it funny, the guy gets these people just so triggered when he points out that their cuisine sucks. Anyway, I'm going to eat this and not let it go to waste, and then we're going to go on to the next recipe. Since for the first couple of dump dinners we used pizza and pasta, now we're going with chicken, and we're going to be making island chicken. What island? I don't know, but based on our previous results, I'm assuming like 3 Mile Island or like the Island of Misfit Toys or something. So first, I'm going to pour a little bit of oil into the electric skillet. A little more. Should be about a tablespoon. And turn it up to about a medium heat. And I did not plug that in, so let me not neglect that step. Okay, now it's on. Once it heats up, I'm going to put the chicken in. Okay, so I'm going to dump the chicken, because that's the theme of this book. And if you noticed in the recipe, there is no seasoning at all on this chicken. No pre-seasoning, no marinade, no nothing. We're just supposed to brown fully plain chicken. Like with the ingredients we're using, you would think, maybe it should marinate in that all day, something like that, but no. Plain chicken. The chicken's sufficiently brown, so I'm going to go ahead and cut the heat for a minute. And then we're going to add the other ingredients. First, supposed to add half a cup of orange juice. Then I'm supposed to add half a cup of pineapple chunks. Normally for something like this, you would drain the juice, but for this, I'm adding the juice with it because this chicken's going to need as much flavor as it can get. Then I'm supposed to stir this up. And then I'm supposed to add a quarter of a cup of Asian sesame dressing. That also seems kind of low, but whatever. Okay, so then I'm going to turn this back to the medium heat and stir and cook this up some more. Okay, so this has had plenty of time to cook, so I'm going to go ahead and cut the heat. Yeah, this quote-unquote seasoning for it that we put in there hasn't thickened up one bit. Let's try some. Went ahead and got a bowl of rice per their suggestion. Get some of that pineapple. There we go. Let me take a bite. Absolutely terrible. Absolutely terrible. You would think at a minimum they would have the sense to, I don't know, maybe even use some cornstarch in there to kind of thicken that up and, so it binds to the chicken. This is why you season. This is why you marinate. This is garbage. There is no flavor in this chicken. There's more flavor in the white rice I made with this chicken. Absolutely horrible. Okay, so let's move on to dessert next. So now since we've dumped a few dinners, it's time to dump dessert. Now, I'm not sure if this is intended to be dessert or breakfast, but this is America where those two meals often overlap. So we're going to try the caramel pull-apart bread. So the first ingredient, 2 cans of refrigerated biscuits. And here we go again. Yet again, they are not clear as to what size cans of refrigerated biscuits that we're supposed to use. Are we using grands? Are we using regular biscuits? and both of those come in different sizes. So due to that, I'm going to make an assumption that we're using regular size biscuits. So I got 2 of those. So I'm going to cut these into quarters real quickly. And here they are. So next, need a bundt pan. And I need to spray it with cooking spray. And then layer these biscuits into the pan. Hopefully I got the right size biscuits, and these are going to be enough to make said recipe. There's no way that's enough. There's no way. I guarantee this is supposed to be Grand's biscuits, and they just forgot to mention that part. Luckily, I do happen to have 1 more can of Grand's biscuits in my fridge, so I'm going to go cut that up so I can make this the right way. And here they are. Let me layer these in here, and then we'll get on to the next step. I just want to say this should be about the simplest recipe in this book, and they still managed to bungle it by leaving out information. Okay, so that's done. And now the next step is to make the mixture that goes over it. So first I have 1 cup of brown sugar into the mixing bowl. Then I am going to open this can of evaporated milk, pour that in. Then I need 1 teaspoon of cinnamon into the bowl. And then I need to beat it. All right, that looks sufficiently mixed. Now I'm just supposed to simply pour this over the biscuits. Try to get it to all the spots so it can soak in. And then once my oven has finished preheating, and it just did you hear that beep? Perfect timing. We're going to throw it in for 30 to 40 minutes. So I'm going to put that in the oven and we'll see how it turns out. Okay, so it's time for a 30-minute check. I've gone ahead and pulled this out of the oven. It looks interesting. I'm going to stick a butter knife in there and try to get a feel for the texture. I mean, feels like it should be done. So now I'm supposed to let it chill for about 10 minutes and then invert the bundt pan and get this out. Okay, 10 minutes has elapsed. Let's get the cutting board out and invert this pan and see what we get. Interesting, sure left a lot of the caramel in the pan itself, even with the cooking spray. So let me get a spoon and try to actually get some of this onto the cake. Alright, that should be about enough of it. Before I throw this in the sink, let me take a taste of this caramel. Not as overly sweet as I thought it would be. It's more of like the caramel flavor you get from eating flan. I'm going to put this in the sink and then I'm going to cut me a slice. Alright, I'll take this little front piece right here. Doesn't look that bad. Let me take a bite. I mean, it's passable. I would have thought with how it was made that more of the caramel flavor would be in the main bread portion itself, but amazingly it's not. I mean, it's not offensive. It's passable. But yeah, I mean, absolutely nothing special here. So after my sampling of 4 of the recipes from this book, what is my final verdict on it? Well, Easy cooking is a thing that exists. Limited number of ingredients, fast prep time, easy preparation, easy cleanup. For example, one of my favorite easy meals is to take some boneless, skinless chicken breasts in the morning before I leave for work. Pound them with a hammer to about 3/4 of an inch to an inch thick. Put them in a plastic container and pour a bottle of Italian dressing over it. When I get home, it's ready. I throw it on the electric indoor grill, and in 10 minutes, I have a delicious and healthy main dish. But easy cooking is not what this book is. This book is lazy cooking. It's literally taking just random ingredients, throwing them together, and making trough slop. They don't even do such simple things as seasoning, marinating. Anything that adds the actual flavor to the food has been removed. In addition, it's not even a well-written book. There's steps missing. There's information missing. Like, it's as if after it was written that they never let an editor or proofreader actually touch this thing. And as was confirmed in that video that I linked in the description, we don't even know who actually wrote some of these. I don't even think whoever wrote them actually tried them. They just took a list of ingredients, wrote it down, and were like, oh, yeah, that sounds good. And the thing is, like, Cathy Mitchell, she isn't like, say, Billy Mays or Anthony Sullivan or somebody that you knew straight up was a pitchman. She puts her name on this like she wrote it herself. If you've ever seen her commercials, she has this phony cultivated image as America's grandma, but she's really just another infomercial huckster, and you have to remember that. And what's crazy is that people buy into this. There's a whole cult of people out there online who think she's like the greatest thing ever. But my opinion on this book is that there's only one dump that needs to be involved with it, and that's this one. Right into the trash. Thank you for joining us on today's edition of the Thrift Store Kitchen Review. Be sure to subscribe to our channel, follow us on Facebook in the description below, be sure to get out there and support your local thrift store, and have a wonderful day.